And
There we go.
all right. Okay. You're on, Paul.
Intro.
Yeah.
Good morning. Actually, it's not morning, is it? Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Woolley. Yeah, I'm a member of the Central Forum Committee. So I'd like to introduce my friend, Reverend Canon Vickers Hodge. Reverend Canon Vickers Hodge is retired from serving as the rector of Trinity Anglican Church, Sarnia. And that's over on Murphy, right next door to St. Timothy Hortons. Carol and Vickers moved to Sarnia from New Brunswick in 2012, where he had been serving as Archdeacon of St. Andrews. Previously, Vickers served as priest and pastor in a number of parishes in Ontario, Glanworth and London, Wingham and Lucknow, and New Brunswick, St. John and Grand Bay. Vickers is married to Carol and father of 3 adult children, Jenna, Andrew, and Aaron. And he's the proud grandfather of Aidan and Chloe Eve. Vickers is an active photographer and is passionate about woodworking in his spare time. Now, for more than 30 years, Vickers has led pilgrimages to the Holy Land. His most recent pilgrimage has been rescheduled 3 times because of COVID, and they're still hoping for a window in the fall of 2021. Vickers, although retired, continues to preach occasionally and is involved in pastoral ministry. He continues to serve as the canon missioner of the Anglican Diocese of Huron. Now, for the past 5 years, Vickers has been deeply involved in the work of refugee resettlement on behalf of the Anglican churches of Lambton and Kent. And tonight, refugees are his topic. So may I introduce Vickers? We can't see Vickers.
Before Vickers starts, I'm just going to mute all, and then Vickers, you can unmute yourself, okay?
Right. Is my, I see video there.
Okay, can you unmute yourself now?
I'm unmuted.
Yeah, okay.
And on my visual, you can see me.
Yes.
This is good. Paul,
Perfect.
Thank you for that introduction. I feel tired suddenly. Am I doing all that stuff? I guess I am. Yeah. So it's nice to be with you guys again. And this is great. By the way, you said my Holy Land pilgrimage had been rescheduled 4 times. It's now been rescheduled 5 times. So September 2021 might be possible, but it probably wouldn't be wise. So we've rescheduled for May 2022. It's just again and again and again, but so be it. You know, I don't want to take a bunch of senior citizens to the Holy Land unless I'm confident that it's safe and that all of the arrangements are actually going to work. You know, it would be pretty foolhardy to take, 30 or 40 people. I don't even know if I'd get 30 or 40 anymore. I mean, if I was trying to do it right now, probably half of them would be afraid to go, Anyway, that's an aside. I'm going to try to share my screen now. And let's see. Oh, host has disabled participant screen sharing. You got to make me a co-host.
Yes. Okay. Oh.
Yeah, it says I'm allowed to now. Let me just find the screen I want to share.
Okay.
PowerPoint.
Okay.
Are you looking at my screen?
Oh, yes, I am.
Now you're probably looking at the screen with my notes and the little stuff, right? So now I want to make this screen bigger.
Okay. And
what are you seeing now? Are you seeing the one screen with just 2 pictures on it, or a whole bunch of other stuff as well?
There's 2 big pictures and there's a bunch of little pictures along the bottom.
All right, you got the wrong screen. Let me just switch screens.
Oh, okay.
Stop share, and then share screen, and that's the one I'm sharing. Now you should see one screen with two pictures. Is that right?
Yes.
That's the right one.
wonderful. Yeah,
How about that, eh?
that's
I gotta
perfect.
tell you, eventually we're gonna know how to do Zoom, right?
Yeah, oh, we're getting better all the time.
So let me just tell you about, this is sort of to finish the introduction. So you're looking at a picture there of my wife and I, Carol and I, and we're standing under a lemon tree in Jerusalem. That's one of my great passions. And the picture to the right is me sitting in the preacher's seat in the synagogue at Capernaum, where Jesus preached in a synagogue about 40 feet underneath the one that I'm sitting in.
Oh,
But there I am in the Holy Land with a camera in my hand with my wife. So you're looking at sort of the passions of my life. Next. So I'm a member of LARC, the Lambton Anglican Refugee Committee. Now, LARC is just a committee that organizes the work for refugees for the Anglican churches and the deaneries of Lambton and Kent. LARC doesn't really matter. It's the work of the Anglican Church that with refugees that I want to speak of tonight. And I feel quite passionate about this cause. There are something like 80 million people in the world today who are what we call displaced. That is, they cannot live safely in the place where they would choose to live. That's a lot of people. And part of the reason why I feel passionately about refugees is as a follower of Jesus, somebody who's learning what it means to follow Jesus. I'm very aware that the church has always, Jesus has always had a kind of special place in his heart for the poor, the lost, and the lonely, the broken, the dispossessed, and refugees. And in fact, when Jesus was an infant, Mary and Joseph had to flee to Egypt because the murderous King Herod wanted to get rid of Jesus because he saw him as a threat to his power. And so Jesus and his family would meet the definition of a refugee, today's modern world's definition of a refugee. After the Holy Family had spent 2 or 3 years in Egypt, they returned to the Holy Land. They returned to Israel, but they couldn't go back to Bethlehem because King Herod's son was ruling there. And so they went to the north of the country, to Nazareth, and that's where Jesus grew up. And so he was an internally displaced person, as well as being a refugee. So I just find that, so that passage from Matthew makes the point. So LARC, Lambton Anglican Refugee Committee, I suppose it should be LKARK now that Kent has joined us, but you couldn't pronounce it anymore, so we left the name alone. We've been busy since about 2015. Before that, before 2015, Anglican churches in our area had supported refugees here and there over many, many years. But we began a coordinated work with all the churches in the deanery working together in 2015 when we formed LARC. This slide gives you a bit of a picture of what the refugee situation in the world. Millions of people suffer. About 80 million people are displaced. 26 million of them fit the UN HCR's definition of a refugee. According to the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, a refugee is, and this is a quote, someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reason of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. So a well-founded fear of being persecuted. And you can't go back to your home because of that. That makes you a refugee. There are 26 million refugees in our world right now who meet that definition. And 20 million of them come under their purview of UNHCR. Another 5 million are refugees in Israel and the countries around Israel under a different UN agency, and these are Palestinians. So 5.6 million Palestinian refugees under UNRWA and 20.4 million refugees from all the other countries in the world. And that slide also shows, I think, some of the implications here. 40% of the world's refugees are children. 80% live in countries where there are acute food shortages, which is to say there's an awful lot of hungry children and hungry people that have no place to live. I mean, one of the families we're working with to help right now have been living 12 people in a 2-bedroom apartment for 7 years. And they live on bags of rice delivered by the UN. Added to the 26 million refugees, there are 4.2 million more people who have asked for protection, but have not yet been granted refugee status. So they would be called asylum seekers. So you've got an awful lot of folk that fit under this description. Canada has a long history of being a world leader in the resettlement of refugees. Since 1980, more than 1 million refugees have been welcomed into Canada. Last year, Canada welcomed 30,000 refugees into Canada. 58%, that's nearly 60% of all the refugees that came to Canada were sponsored privately, and that would include church groups. So almost 40% were government sponsored. The government of Canada sets its target number of refugees each year based on the humanitarian situation, but also based on the numbers that are going to be supported by Canadians. So the next slide, here we are. So a brief history of what we've done up till this point is the Anglican churches in Sarnia, Lambton County and Kent County. Since 2015, we've completed the sponsorship of 3 families, which is to say we started the paperwork and actually landed 3 families in our area. And in order to do that, we raised $134,000 for refugee sponsorship work. The families that we have sponsored so far, there's 3 of them: the Hussein family, the Al Ahmad family, and the Othman family. Let me just tell you a little bit about these 3 families. The first family we began helping was Suzanne Hussein to sponsor her family. One day while I was working at Trinity Church, a lady came to the office and basically said, my family are in danger of their lives, and all I want to do is rescue my sister and her family, and I don't know how to do it, and I need help. And they lived in the neighborhood, and Trinity Church decided they would help them. And as we were beginning the process, I phoned a few of my friends in the other churches and said, we can do this, and Trinity has a heart to do it. But it feels like this is the sort of project that a group of churches should take on rather than one church. And so that's how LARC got formed, was the Hussein family coming to Trinity saying, please help us. They were Syrian refugees living in Jordan, and they arrived in Canada March 29th, 2018. So that was the first of the three families. The next family we helped was the Al-Ahmad family. They were Syrian refugees and living in Lebanon. And we received their name in early 2016, and we didn't get them into Canada till the middle of 2017. It's a long process sometimes to get a family from the point where you have their names until the point when they arrive in Canada. Ezeldine is now employed, and this family are adapting to life in Canada. And then the third family that we assisted was the Othman family. They too were Syrian refugees, and they were living in Lebanon. We applied to sponsor them in April 2016, and they arrived in June of 16. So that shows what can happen. Sometimes it takes 6 months or 3 months, and sometimes it takes a year and a half. This family have settled very well in Canada. Nasser is employed, and actually my slide's out of date. They have bought a house in Sarnia, and they really are in short order becoming very connected to our community. I'll show you a little more of that in a few minutes. So our team is learning about the process by doing it. And it's a long, complex process. There are many different ways of sponsoring different government processes. I gotta say, it's a big learning curve. And our team has learned the ropes, but it's not been an easy process to learn. One of the things that happens is after we're given a list of families that need help and where they live and the number of people in the family and their ages. And we don't know much more than that about most families we help. We pick the name off the list. We say, well, we'll take this family of 4 or this family of 5. And the next thing is they have to fill out a bunch of application forms that go to the Government of Canada. And CSIS review them to make sure that none of them are, terrorists or criminals that are fleeing justice in their own country. So the process includes that security check. There's also a lengthy health check to make sure they're reasonably healthy. And now COVID-19 is adding delays and complexity. I think it's important to make the point that refugees, generally speaking, make very good citizens. If you look at the unemployment rate of refugees and the unemployment rate of Canadian-born people, you'll see those numbers are pretty close together, 9% and 6%. So refugees don't have as many connections. They don't have as many, as great a social network. It takes longer. But by the time one generation passes, refugees have the same employment rate as Canadian-born citizens. In fact, refugees who came to Canada between 1981 and 1990 have the very same employment stats as Canadians born in Canada during that period. So I just want to underline the point that refugees make good Canadians, good citizens. And I'll just drive that point home with this slide. First, I want to say the Government of Canada and sponsoring organizations like the church, we don't help refugees because of some sort of financial reason. We do it because it's the right thing to do. When people are rightfully afraid for their lives and fleeing danger, the right thing to do is to give them a safe place to go. And Canada is a wealthy, safe place. Nevertheless, it bears saying that Canada's investment in refugees actually pays off in the long haul. Over time, refugees pay more in income tax than they receive in public benefits and services. And you can see that lower blue line is refugees, and how they start out in the hole, but as the years pass, eventually they reach the dotted line, which is the average of all Canadians. So that within a generation or two, refugees are contributing as much to Canada as people who were born here. I wanted to share this picture of the Othman family. This is Nasser and Noor Othman, shown with Miles Vanny, who is, most of you know, Miles Vanny runs the Inn of the Good Shepherd. So Nasser and Noor, who were a family we sponsored, we no longer have any responsibility for them. They've passed their 1 year, but we cared for them for a year and brought them to Canada. And here they are delivering a meal that they cooked. They wanted to give something back to their community. And so they're delivering a meal with the staff of the Inn of the Good Shepherd. They are already making a difference in our community, and they've only been here 5 years. So what's next for the Anglican Refugee Ministry in our region? We are now in the process, well along in the process of sponsoring 2 more families. The first family is a family of 12 Christian refugees from Iraq, presently living in Jordan. And then the next group that we're bringing are a group of 4 Syrian refugees presently living in Lebanon. So we've got these 2 families, and we are at the moment simultaneously working on these 2 files. And which family will get here first, we don't know. But we're working on a total of 16 people in 2 family groups. In order to bring the first group, the group of 12 Christian refugees, we needed to raise $75,000, and we have done that. The $75,000 is in the bank. And for the 4 Syrian refugees, our next family, we will need to raise something in the neighborhood of $30,000, and we've really just begun on the fundraising for that. This is the Nissan family, the family of 12. In the center is Hannah and his wife, and then they have 3 married sons, 2 married sons and 3 unmarried sons. The married sons have children, so we've got a family of 12. These are Syriac Catholic Christians from Iraq. And the story about the Syrian Christians is a horrible story, but they were driven from their village in Iraq by ISIL, the so-called Islamic State, who swept through the region, killing people who weren't like them. And the Christians of Iraq, who've been there from the very beginning, the Christian community in Iraq is one of the oldest churches in the world. These people were Christians while we were still sort of running around in skins, living like Vikings. These folks have been this church, the Christian church in Iraq, dates to the 3rd century. And these are the spiritual descendants of some of the first Christians. And they were driven from their homeland by Islamic State, who killed everybody in one village and then let the word spread, and all the Christians in the surrounding villages fled. They're from Karakosh province, in Nineveh province. They have no hope or desire to return to Iraq. There's nothing left for them. Most of the adults in this family have post-secondary education. 3 of them are school teachers. They speak several languages. They all speak Syriac, which is a modern dialect of the Aramaic language that Jesus and the disciples would have spoken. They speak Arabic, which would be the primary language of Syria, and they speak some English. The next family we're going to help is Nasser Othman's brother. we've already helped Nasser and his wife Noor come to Canada, and we thought that was the end of it. We would move on to another family. However, Nasser's brother is truly in danger of his life, and we've decided that we would help an extension of this family. They've fled from Syria barely with their lives. In fact, they fled twice. They had to go back and get a passport, and in the course of going back to get a passport, almost got killed. And now they're living in a garage in Lebanon, in an unheated garage, a family of four, and they have no place to go and are wanting desperately to come to Canada. So we're going to help them too. People ask, so I think I've explained what we're doing and why we do it. So if any of you are moved to want to be involved in our work, let me tell you how you can help. There are two ways. We need money and we need time. We need people to give money that we can use to pay. When a refugee family come to Canada, we are, as the sponsoring group, responsible for all their living costs for 1 year. And the government doesn't want them to work during that first year. The most important thing for them to do in the first year is to learn English and to put down some roots in the community. The long experience of refugee resettlement is if they get jobs too soon, they don't develop the language skills and they end up living in the margins forever. But if they take the time to take the English language courses that the YMCA offer and get properly settled in the community, then they have much richer and better lives going forward. So our job is to take care of all their living costs for the first year. So we always need money. It takes about $8,000 per adult and $4,000 per child to support them for their first year. The government requires that we put all of that money on deposit before the application is processed, which is to say, to bring in this the family of 12 from Jordan, we had to put about $75,000 into an escrow account. So we have to prove we've got the money before they'll process the paperwork. Let's see. One way people can help is with, so I said we need money and we need time. So if a person's interested in helping with our work, John Damaso is in charge of the paperwork for our team. And there's a lot of work to do to get the paperwork filled out so that a refugee family can hop through all the proper hoops and get approved to come to Canada. It's really difficult to get all this paperwork done in English, letter perfect, when you're working with often a family with English, for whom English is a second language. So John and a few people work together to get the paperwork done. We've done it now for one of these two families, but we haven't yet done it for the second family. We also need to find housing, and we either rent a place or we buy or rent a house or houses. And once we have a property, we need to furnish it. We have to put furniture in it from top to bottom and fill the fridge with food so that when the family arrive, they have a good place to live. We also need people. I mean, let me go back to that housing part. If a person's interested in helping us, I guess what I'm trying to say is someone who wants to help us to locate rental property and furnish it, get gifts of furniture, there's a place for you to plug in. Here's another way to plug in, our resettlement crew. This group meet the family on arrival. They assess their immediate needs. They familiarize them with the community and available supports. They take them, they make sure that whatever they need, they get. And sometimes those needs aren't understood until the family arrive. If one of the children arrive needing dental work, we make sure that happens and so on. So there's room for people who want to help us with the resettlement work. To raise the kind of money that we raise takes a bit of effort. We have a group working with Mike Tanner who raised money for the interim support. And as I say, they've already raised the 75,000 for the next family on our stream, but we need 30,000 for the family after that. Another place where people are needed is to assist with transportation. When our families arrive, they need to go to appointments and they don't have driver's licenses and they don't have cars. So we need to get them to and from their various appointments, including going to language classes at the YMCA 4 days a week. We need to teach them about bus routes and how to use a bus pass. And eventually we help them with driver training and help them to locate a vehicle. So there's need for people to participate in that part of our work. And finally, I guess the easiest way to help, if a person wants to help and they don't want to volunteer for any of those other jobs, you can write a check. And if you want to help with the refugee work and you want to give some money, the way to do that is to give your money to any Anglican church in this county, any Anglican church in Sarnia or the county of Lambton or the county of Kent, and just mark on your check that it's for refugees or LARC. You'll get a tax receipt and we'll get the money. And I'm now going to stop sharing my screen and do questions and answers. Let me figure out how to do that. I'm having trouble figuring out how to do that. Somebody unmute themselves and make sure that they know what I'm doing. End slideshow. That's what I wanted. There we are.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that there's questions. Sometimes when I talk about refugees, I think I've explained something, but I haven't. And there's some burning question or, so what are you wondering about?
So there are probably there aren't very good questions on the chat, but I think probably people have questions that they just like to ask, without using the chat feature. Sure. But you talked about friends in quotes early in the presentation. I just wonder what you meant by that.
When I said friends financially, well,
okay.
I would call you friends. I mean, we've had people. Right. The last time we sponsored someone, when we were raising money for this, the family of 12, we had a lady walk into Trinity Church with $10,000 in her hands, a check. Mm-hmm. Not a member of our church, a member of the community who heard we were helping a refugee family, and she had been given some money in an inheritance, and she thought this would be the best thing she could do with it. So I would call her a friend. A lady with $10,000 who wants to make the world a better place. I mean, you see, the refugee work in Canada is done through, the government doesn't want to deal with 50,000 people. And so the government of Canada has rules about how the refugee process works. And they only work with people who are what they call SAH holders. Sponsorship agreement holders. So these are groups like the Anglican Diocese of Huron who have sat down with the government and taken the course and understand the process and promised to abide by Canada's rules. And so a group like the Anglican Diocese is called a shareholder, a sponsorship agreement holder. The government deals with them, and then that SAH works with people like us. So the Diocese of Huron might have 10 groups doing the kind of work we're doing. And we don't have the expertise locally to know all the rules about how to deal with the government. But thank goodness the diocese has some people who do. And it's, and there's a lot of rules. I mean, there really are. And we're always learning. So the Anglicans maybe are carrying the flag for this, but there's lots of people who have no affiliation with the Anglican Church that care about refugees.
Mhm.
and I'd call them our friends.
Well, I think some of the people that are in this Zoom meeting are from outside of Sarnia-Lambton, and I think some of them have been involved in refugees too. So if you have questions, just unmute yourself and just speak up to ask questions.
Can I say, I see John Damazo here.
Yeah.
Wave, John. Can you hear me? John's also a member of LARC. John looks after the paperwork end of our work. It's a horribly complicated task.